Hello? This video will be very different from everything I've done before because it's time for less emotion and more analysis, more specifics. This will be a long video as there will also be an English version for Western viewers. People in the West, especially the United States, need to know what's happening in Ukraine and who Volodymyr Zelensky is. This video is an expose and a review of Volodymyr Zelensky's podcast with Lex Fridman. There will be a preface, a main part, and an epilogue. So, as a preface, I want to first address Lex Fridman himself. Lex, you know that I respect you a lot. You know that I have been your subscriber and fan for a long time, you could say, of your work and your channel. Please don't take offense at this video analysis, as I have no complaints against you. I could have recorded a short 15-minute video just to express my point of view on everything I heard. But I want people to know the whole truth. I understand that you probably didn't have the goal of going and pressuring Zelensky with questions. Moreover, I believe that you were carrying out a mission. Not that someone ordered you, but I believe you saw your actions as part of a peacekeeping mission. But there is one small detail that unfortunately I have to inform you about. This podcast, it can have a side effect. And people who are not well informed, people who are unprepared, might think that Volodymyr Zelensky is some kind of saint, some kind of perfect president. Why? Because Volodymyr Zelensky is an actor. An actor's job is to deceive people. We've seen all of this in this podcast. Facial expressions, constantly changing expressions, those little acting tricks, changes in intonation, flirting, shifting emotions, all of that is an actor's work. His job in those 3 hours was to win over the audience. I also ask people, and you Lex, to pay attention to how Zelensky constantly looked to the left and right throughout all 3 hours. I don't know who was sitting to his left, most likely it was Andrei Yermak or other close members of his team, but it was like he was constantly seeking approval, like he was acting the whole time, all 3 hours. That wasn't President Volodymyr Zelensky as a person, that was an actor. I would also like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that the president's job is not just about geopolitics. Yes, almost all 3 hours, well, about 80% of the time was sort of about geopolitics, about the war, about some foreign policy issues. But let's not forget that Ukraine is the largest country in Europe, where a lot of people live. Yes, many have left, but many want to return, people like me included. We are very concerned about internal affairs. You had a wonderful podcast, Lex, with Javier Milei. I really enjoyed it because you talked specifically about ideology, philosophy, about what he is doing, has done, and plans to do. Zelensky never said that. I'll now explain to everyone what he said, separating truth from lies and showing how things really are. I want to ask Lex, once again, not to take offense at me, but I think in such difficult moments you need to make up your mind. Even though I take into account your mission and your hard work, you need to decide whether you want to get to the truth and do something about this situation, or if you want to establish friendly relations, in this case, with Zelensky. But in any case, all your actions are your right. I remain your viewer and your fan. And now we move on to the actual expose, review, and analysis of this podcast.
The people who are hitting speak Russian. They're hitting people who were recently told that they're actually defending the Russian-speaking community. And that's why I don't respect either the leader or the director of today's Russia, nor its people. That's all.
I want to tell the Western audience, in case you don't know this yet, about half of the soldiers in our army, in the Ukrainian army, speak Russian. About half of the entire population of Ukraine speaks Russian. Now I will show you a screenshot. This is a screenshot from the official video address of Zelensky, where he is talking via video call with the commander-in-chief of our army, Syrskyi. And as you can see in the software they are using, the interface is set to Russian. It could have been set to English or if not to Ukrainian, but the interface is in Russian. I also want to show you a clip of my second opponent. So Zelensky is my opponent and another one of my opponents is Arestovich, whom I just can't stand on a personal level because he's just as much of a pathological liar as Zelensky. But listen to what he said as someone who worked for 2.5 years in Zelensky's office.
All negotiations were conducted in Russian. All off-the-record conversations were in Russian. The president's office is a place where people speak Russian. Everyone without exception, including Zelensky. Always. There are never any internal exceptions. It's just for official appearances. The person says, I speak my native language, the language of my mother, the language in which I built my career, grew up, and so on. I don't respect him. I didn't hear a single meeting during all my time in the office that was conducted in any language other than Russian. I spent 2.5 years there, and what a 2.5 years they were.
I want to add that Zelensky and I also have a mutual acquaintance, and I know that Zelensky has spoken Russian all his life, and he still speaks Russian now. I'm confirming everything Aristovich said. His family speaks Russian, but on camera he must play politics, boost ratings, appeal to people, and cling to power. He suddenly acts ultra-patriotic, speaks Ukrainian, and even seems like a nationalist. Next, why blame the people of Russia when there are all kinds of people there? Yes, most likely 70 to 80% really do support Putin and support the war against Ukraine, but there are still 20 to 30% who are definitely against this war, who don't like Putin, and maybe even more people don't like Putin. We can't really check this because people in Russia are intimidated. They are intimidated just like people in Ukraine. If you watch this video to the end, you'll see that Ukraine now has a dictatorship like Russia, with no freedom of speech, and anyone with different views on the state's development, internal or external, faces the same situation. They face repression, persecution, and are treated as second-class citizens in Ukraine. So what can we demand from the people of Russia if we speak in general terms and as a whole? If people fear for their lives and won't speak up, this is a very difficult question. Putin, his inner circle, and supporters are one group, but there are other people in Russia.
I can see right away I need to wait 2 seconds, hear it. There's great humor. I've heard wonderful stories with excellent English translation. I just won't see it, but I understand it hurts. And another reason, hoped that we could show. Sometimes it's said that the Russian language is banned here in Ukraine.
Lex himself says it was very hard for him to work on and get through this podcast, and I want to explain this again for the Western audience in case you don't know. Here's some data. About 70% of Russian and Ukrainian words are identical, and as I mentioned, Zelensky speaks Russian fluently and always uses it. And this podcast could have been done in Russian so that Lex himself would feel better, more comfortable. He would feel more relaxed, understand better. The interpretation would be better, and accordingly, the overall quality of the podcast would be higher. But why did Zelensky refuse outright? Because I repeat, he has one goal, to maintain his ratings and to be liked by people.
By the way, Javier Milei understood me perfectly without words.
Maybe it's the language of love.
Respect.
Respect.
I respect him. We had a great conversation. It was wonderful, excellent.
Now Zelensky is trying to show the Western audience how positively he feels about Javier Milei. I want to remind you that Javier Milei, just like me, is a libertarian. Zelensky deceived the people of Ukraine when, before the parliamentary elections, he named his party Servant of the People. They called themselves Libertarians, the Libertarian Party. But as soon as they entered the parliament, on the second day they said they were centrists, and a few months later they said they were socialists. Today we see that they are true communists. I want to remind you, and for those who don't know, show a member of Zelensky's team. Mr. Hetmantsev, who is a very important person in his team, who is essentially in charge of all tax policy and economic policy. He leads the tax committee in Ukraine's parliament, and here is the exact title of the interview he gave to one of the media outlets. Taxation is the art of plucking a goose so that it doesn't scream. That's how Hetmantsev's team treats entrepreneurs. And at the same time, he tries to show what a friend he is to Milei. And do you know who this person, Hetmantsev, is? He worked before Zelensky became president for 8 or 9 years as an assistant, a direct assistant to a member of the Ukrainian parliament at the time, Deputy Sivkovich. As of today, Sivkovich has been identified as a Russian Federal Security Service agent. Doesn't it bother you that someone like this has been on Zelensky's team for all 6 years? As a Ukrainian entrepreneur, I can say Hetmantsev is essentially working to undermine Ukraine's economy.
Odesa, I adore Odesa because it has its own temperament. The local people have their own accent. It's unique. There are many different nationalities there. And you know a lot of stories. Authentic Odesa cuisine. By the way, you know, the local cuisine is unlike any other. These dishes are truly unique.
Zelensky again switched to actor mode and praised Odesa. It really is a great, beautiful city where wonderful people live. But what is Zelensky doing there now? They hired activists with criminal backgrounds and made them agents of their special services. These activists terrorize everyone. They abuse people who speak Russian. They are renaming streets, which the whole of Odesa is protesting against. Monuments are being demolished. The last thing that outraged me and other people was how they demolished the monument to Vladimir Vysotsky. Each of you can read on the internet who Vladimir Vysotsky is. He is a person who dedicated his whole life. He is a singer, a bard, who spent his entire life fighting against the KGB of the Soviet Union. He was repressed his whole life, and all his songs reflect that. He never said anything bad about Ukraine, but they've gone so far as to demolish monuments and erase the memory of such great people. Zelensky is behind all of this.
I love Odessa. I used to go there several times a year. Even now, I go there several times a year because of things like strengthening air defense systems, our grain corridor, and so on. I go there more often than I used to.
And now I'll tell you even more interesting facts about the city of Odesa. The head of the military administration of the Odesa region, appointed by Zelensky, is someone named Ole Keeper. This Ole Keeper is a lustrated official from the time of the fugitive president Viktor Yanukovych. He is Andriy Yermak's godfather. Andriy Yermak handles some duties of Volodymyr Zelensky. In the United States, he'd be called vice president, but Ukraine doesn't have that role. This man is now fully carrying out the shadow governance of Ukraine. Odesa is the Black Sea, a port, grain, and the grain corridor, as Zelensky said. And you can go and watch an excellent investigation by Hromadske, which is a YouTube channel in Ukraine, about the kind of money that Ole Keeper is making there, together with Yermak. I want to stress to the Western audience that this is entirely Zelensky's team. But he didn't tell this to Lex Fridman, and of course Lex himself, for completely understandable reasons, doesn't have such a deep understanding of the internal situation. But people in the United States who watch this podcast will see this moment when he said it and think that Zelensky is just perfect and that everything in Ukraine is actually fine. No, it's just corruption, with everything taken over by Zelensky's team.
He didn't like to talk about any details of the war. He never bragged. Although as a boy, I would ask him, how many fascists did you kill? But he never talked about it. He believed that war it's a great tragedy.
Now Zelensky is talking about his grandfather who fought in World War II. My great-grandfather also fought in World War II. He captured 5 or 6 European capitals. I have his medals. He's a war hero too, like Zelensky says his grandfather was. And Zelensky himself has just said, and many people in Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries know, that the generation that witnessed World War II never liked to talk about it. They always said anything, just no war. In the former Soviet Union, every holiday toast still wishes for one thing, no war. And Zelensky is now engaging in such manipulation and hypocrisy when he repeats his grandfather's words, while at the same time, war is being cultivated in Ukraine today. He, now we'll get to that, throughout this entire podcast, has been cultivating war, showing every unwillingness for peace and demonstrating a strong desire to fight for as long as possible. How are his words logical? He's just blatantly lying.
Everyone was talking and making predictions, but I requested just one thing, especially from the United States. If you're sure, if you have evidence, if you talk to him and he tells you there will be an invasion, if you're afraid of all this, first, I'm not asking for evidence. Just give me 2 things. Provide us with weapons, but it's better to create conditions so that there is no war at all. First of all, it's not weapons. I ask them for sanctions. That is, intimidate him. Don't say please that if he comes, if he crosses the border, if he starts killing, then we will impose sanctions. But that's bullshit. Sorry, really.
Look at what happened at the Normandy format meeting in Paris, where Putin was, where Macron was, where Merkel and Zelensky were. Look at how brazenly Zelensky behaved there.
Asking for something isn't about Ukraine. Ukraine is a strong new country that doesn't ask for help. We can even help others ourselves.
He didn't behave like a president who wants to avoid war. Even back then, basically, I don't know why he was escalating the situation. Of course, none of this justifies Putin, and to me, Putin is a bandit. According to various media and insiders, the CIA gave Zelensky all the information and revealed everything to him in fall 2021 today. I'll also show how Putin would attack Ukraine, including the full war plan. Why didn't Zelensky prepare the country for war? Why didn't Zelensky evacuate people from the frontline areas where, in fact, there are now real living cemeteries? For 2 days, we didn't know where Zelensky was. The members of parliament I personally spoke with didn't know what to do. And they admitted to me no one actually gave us any instructions on what to do, really. And only a miracle, the heroism of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people in general, saved the situation and pushed Putin back, gave Putin a blow in those first days. By the third or fourth day, Zelensky was already promoting himself, filming videos claiming to be a hero who didn't run away. But I also want to remind you, and the Western audience can check me on this, the words of the then Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, who spoke with Putin and sought a direct confirmation from Putin that he was not planning to kill Zelensky. Naftali Bennett accomplished that then. Only then did Zelensky begin recording videos claiming he hadn't fled. If the army hadn't bravely defended Ukraine and Putin had annexed half or more, do you think Zelensky still wouldn't have fled? Do you really believe that? How is it an achievement for any world leader just to not flee? And dozens of Ukrainian citizens, residents of Ukraine, didn't flee either, including myself. I faced the war in the city of Kiev, and so did my family. So does that mean we're some kind of special heroes too? No, the heroes are only at the front. As for the talk about sanctions, it's just ridiculous. I don't know who this is meant for. How can the United States or any other democratic country impose sanctions for actions that haven't happened? It's just complete nonsense. If Putin hasn't attacked yet, how can you impose sanctions on him? Yes, Biden did that and you could threaten sanctions, but how do you impose them beforehand? That's just complete nonsense. Zelensky is clearly showing he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Everything has changed. This story has turned. The history of humanity has turned. And for you, you were the president. You talked about fighting corruption. You talked about the country's freedom. There were powerful and interesting reforms, but this morning everything changed.
Lex, right now I want to address you personally. What you're saying is a fundamental mistake. In fact, Zelensky's approval rating, I'll show it on the screen now, was going down. And it was actually at a historic low at that time, just a month before the war started. Ukraine faced major economic and social problems, with everything falling apart. At that time, new business taxes were being prepared, sparking major protests in Kiev. Even then, Zelensky was restricting free speech, which Ukrainian journalists protested. At that time, he was preparing what was called the media law, and journalists in Ukraine said that it was basically a ban on their profession. I'm not a journalist myself. I don't even consider myself a blogger. You can consider what I do to be called politics, even though I'm an entrepreneur, and just openly express my opinion. But you shouldn't be mistaken or mislead other Americans.
But at that moment, I was the one making the decision, quickly and without hesitation. And I can't say that I'm just that kind of person. I'm just a living person who thought that if help was needed here and now, to help evacuate people, to help people with children. Many cities were blocked at that time. I was only thinking about how we could deliver food there. During the day, we did a lot of things, even though we understood that at that moment, they had basically occupied part of our country.
Now, I'll show you a video of Zelensky mocking Blinken and then CIA Chief Burns, who visited Kiev and urgently warned him that war was imminent, urging action. He just laughed at them. Watch this.
Overall, the agenda of our conversation matches, but still, I want to discuss some things in detail because your intelligence is excellent, but you are far across the ocean and we are here on the ground. I think there are some things we know a little deeper about our own country.
When we were required to prepare for war, evacuate people, build fortifications, he did none of that. He laughed. Do you know what he told people? The whole country was worried and couldn't sleep before the war. It's a very frightening feeling. Look at what he said in his address to the nation.
Right now, they're not actively attacking our land, but your nerves, so that you have a constant feeling of anxiety. You need to exhale, calm down, and not rush to buy buckwheat and matches. In April, we'll have a big celebration, and in May, as usual, there will be sunshine, holidays, barbecues, and Victory Day.
He advised people not to trust only one source of propaganda. He said, get ready to go out into nature and grill barbecue. To relax. There will be no war. It's all just escalating the situation, he said. Look at what happened to the city of Mariupol, where I have many friends and acquaintances. It's a living cemetery there. According to various estimates, about 80,000 civilians died there. Neighbors buried their other neighbors under the house near the high-rise buildings. It's a nightmare. It's worse than any horror movie you've ever seen. 2 days before the war, Zelensky and other officials visited Mariupol and said there would be no war. During those 2 days, business contacts from Mariupol called and said large chains were removing goods and car dealerships were relocating cars out of the city. Because in reality, everyone has some kind of connections. Ukraine is that kind of country, and they knew there would be a war. People weren't warned or evacuated. After that, a catastrophe happened and Putin annexed Mariupol as well. And I remind the American audience that the city of Mariupol is an access point to the Sea of Azov, which we have lost.
Weapons were handed out to people. That's exactly how it was. Trucks would arrive and simply hand out weapons to people so they could defend the capital. Ordinary people just on the street. Ordinary people who understood that if the Russians came in completely, what we already knew from reports from other cities would happen.
That's exactly what happened, and here is a witness to it. We tried to do that too. My friend went to try to get those weapons. I was going to go there as well, but there just wasn't enough for everyone. Thank God we had our legal weapons. At that time, everyone in Kiev and across Ukraine focused solely on defense. I'm not even talking about helping people or anything else. And today, the Zelensky-Yermak regime accused me of being a Russian agent. They started persecuting my family. They sent their special service, the security service of Ukraine, to the apartment where my mother and grandmother live, conducted a search there and accused my mother. A criminal case was opened against her, now sent to court and seen as justifying Russian aggression. My mother simply reposted my video on Facebook. They did this because I applied for political asylum in the United States and they just can't get to me. This is what Zelensky really is. Unfortunately, no one told you about this.
Fortunately, I had 20 years of experience before that, where I managed a television studio, television channels, and fairly large media resources. I understood that it was necessary to build an information network very quickly. Thanks to this, I started reaching out constantly, 3 to 5 times a day. Basically, I became the source of information for people who were in cities that were cut off from other information. And it was very important for me to preserve digital communication, to keep the internet, to maintain contact with every person. At first, it was just this kind of contact, and then we also built a separate media platform which all the news agencies from Ukraine joined. This network was called Marathon.
Zelensky has never worked in the open market. Before the war, all television in Ukraine was owned by oligarchs, and I believe this will remain the case after the war. Zelensky's studio is called Kvartal 95, and they worked, and all their business was always only with the oligarchs, contracts with major television channels that are owned specifically by the oligarchs. Zelensky has never been an entrepreneur in the true sense. He leads the creative team, while business at Kvartal 95 was managed by others like Mindich and the Shefir brothers. And they created the telethon in order to completely shut down freedom of speech. And here it's not just about, and it's not only about Putin's propaganda. It's a perfect chance to get rid of all political competitors. Look at what's happening today, almost 3 years into the war. But the situation is no longer the same as he described in that podcast excerpt I just showed you. Even by his view of life and democracy, can you open television channels? No. He gains nothing from politics. Moreover, his propagandist Natalia Masichuk openly said that this special service, the security service of Ukraine, will come knocking on anyone who expresses an opinion different from the state propaganda. Zelensky's information policy is led by terrible people, many of whom worked for the Yanukovych regime. We called them anti-Maidan, as those who were against Maidan. But the ones who really benefited from this television marathon were people like Arestovich. Arestovich became well known through the television marathon, like other propagandists now turning that fame into money, politics, and higher ratings. Arestovich, for example, would sit there and say, "Calm down, people, in 2 or 3 weeks it will all be over, unpack your emergency bags." And as a result, many died, many lost their property, and no one was held accountable for this deception of the people. Zelensky also hasn't told you about this now. And if you turn on this telethon today, it's just one continuous disgrace and low quality. They're already showing fortune tellers there, can you imagine? Crazy fortune tellers are on national television reading cards about politics. When Americans hear this now, I think they just won't believe me, but you can check it. I publish all of this on my channel.
Just imagine there's Musk, technology, Mars, artificial intelligence, and this guy is standing there with his bare butt talking about tribes. You have to understand, you think you're doing an interview like this Mr. Tucker did an interview there and so on, and everyone says, oh, we're going to make friends with them now. How can you do that? What's this about making friends? He's different. Well, he's just different.
And I want to split his comment into two parts. The first part is Elon Musk. I claim, and you can easily check, that all official propaganda in Ukraine targets Elon Musk. He is insulted with the worst words around the clock on all social networks. He is labeled a Putin agent, Kremlin agent, anti-Ukrainian, and enemy of Ukraine. I'll now show screenshots of insults from top Ukrainian propagandists working for Zelensky's office. All these years, I was the only person in Ukraine who supported Trump and Elon Musk. And that's one of the reasons why I was persecuted by Zelensky. But now, since Trump won the elections in the United States and Musk is one of the most important people in Trump's circle, he's already calling Musk an innovator, a great man, and everything else. And the second part of what he said was about Russia's bare ass, Putin's or whoever's, I don't know. You can think that way, you can believe that, and I can say it because I'm not an official figure, but you're the president of a country, and Lex came to Ukraine on a peacekeeping mission to record this podcast. And all reasonable people understand that a peace agreement, a ceasefire, should be declared as soon as possible. But when you insult like that, and he will keep doing it, you'll see in a moment, it doesn't bring peace any closer. You're only showing a militant attitude that you want to keep fighting. And in general, when it comes to the bare backside, we could argue about this for a long time. Russia's gross domestic product is $1.7 trillion. Ukraine's is $170 billion. The president can't communicate in that tone. This is not a normal situation. It doesn't benefit Ukraine or this particular case.
You say we still need to talk. Listen, we need to be in a strong position and not just talk, but end the war. Yes, it can be in the format of a dialogue. Well, who would be against that? We just need to be in a strong position, and the one on the other side needs to want it too. And do you think he wants to end the war? You're saying naive things. I'm very sorry, I don't want to, but it's naive to believe that he wants to end the war.
Lex, here you should have asked, what is the strong position that Zelensky is talking about? Everyone can interpret this differently. And the Istanbul talks, when the Ukrainian delegation negotiated with Putin in Minsk and later in Istanbul, wasn't that a strong position? And the papers had already been signed, and this was published by the American insider Simon Schuster, among others. The New York Times published the Istanbul Agreement's contents. But then Zelensky's aide, David Arakhamia, the head of his faction in parliament, came out and said that Boris Johnson arrived and disrupted these negotiations, and the war continued. And how many lives could we have saved if the war had stopped? How many would have remained in Ukraine? How many lives wouldn't have been ruined? And here Zelensky is leaving out a very important detail. That's actually true. The United Nations and the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, which is completely controlled by Zelensky, really did officially forbid themselves from negotiating with Russia. You can easily verify this. I'll show it on the screen now. Just think about how much he is misleading the Western audience.
President Trump not only has the will, he also has the means, and these are not just words. I really count on him, and our people count on him. He has enough strength.
And what Zelensky just said, we in Ukraine call changing shoes. He is deceiving people right now because, as I already said, all the official propaganda was against Donald Trump. They called him a friend, an agent of Putin, an agent of the Kremlin. They insulted him. I will show this on the screen now. They called him a completely anti-Ukrainian person. Our largest media outlet, Ukrainska Pravda, published a piece about election night describing how Zelensky's unofficial team from the president's office in Ukraine was monitoring the United States elections. And here is some insider information. Yermak himself tried to calm everyone down and said, "Don't worry, Kamala Harris will win." And you saw that even the Speaker of Congress, Mike Johnson, refused to meet with Zelensky because during that last visit before the United States elections, Zelensky spent time with the Democrats. He visited a factory in Pennsylvania and he openly showed his support for Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. He never supported or respected Trump, and who campaigned to all Ukrainians and promoted Donald Trump, urging the Ukrainian diaspora in the United States to vote for him in these elections. That was me. For nearly 3 years, I was completely alone, the only one supporting Donald Trump for the Ukrainian audience. No one paid me for this because I fully support it ideologically, not just because I find Donald Trump as likable as Elon Musk. I respect both of them a lot, but the most important thing is the ideology. Because I am convinced that Trump is going to do absolutely the right things both for the United States and for the world in general, as the struggle between the right and the left is now a matter of ideology. No, I won't talk about this for long. This is just an analysis specifically for the podcast. But I want to tell Americans how everything really happened. I was the only one in Ukraine who supported Donald Trump all this time. Neither Zelensky nor his team.
But I would like to, I have, you could say, a naive dream, a dream that you would sit down together with Putin and Trump and agree on how to end the fighting, a ceasefire, and how to find a path to peace. And I believe here you don't need force, you need dialogue. There are many carrots and sticks that can be used here to really reach an agreement. And Trump really wants to make a deal and is ready to negotiate.
Lex, for that speech I can only say bravo. That was excellent, and we need more of that.
Because in Putin's mind, he wants to drive a wedge between me and Trump. In Putin's mind, he wants to end the occupation of our territory.
I don't know what Putin is thinking, but no one has created more conflict between him and Trump than Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump told him to fire Ukraine's United States Ambassador Markarova, but Zelensky didn't. As I mentioned, Zelensky supported the Democrats before the elections, while Javier Milei openly backed Trump. Why didn't Zelensky act the same way? And maybe then he and Trump would have had a different relationship, but that didn't happen. So the only one to blame for what we have now is Volodymyr Zelensky.
Sorry, but I need to ask a few tough questions.
Yes, go ahead.
I fully trust you today. You are respected and loved in America. Trump also respects you.
Loves me?
No, that's not what I meant. You said it yourself.
Lex, honestly, I thought you were trolling. That was real trolling, since everyone in America knows nobody respects Zelensky. Social networks are full of memes, people are tired of him, and most think he's a thief. Elon Musk often trolls Zelensky, accusing him of taking American money. But you know this perfectly well, since you are a friend of Elon Musk.
Again, I would like to say that to find a path to peace, you have to start in the middle. Like others, you are a very smart person, and no.
Your Russian isn't very good either, you see?
Sorry.
And I told you, this is just the first meeting.
My English isn't great either.
Your English is very good.
Well, thank you. No, honestly, I can't really speak at all.
Those were wonderful words just now. That's exactly what I've been saying all these years. We need a compromise. Without compromise, it's impossible. There won't be any negotiations. They simply won't happen. And we all know who Putin is. And if compromise isn't the foundation, then nothing will work out. Notice how Zelensky replied to you. He just made everything a joke. Why? Because he isn't even planning to enter into peace negotiations. He isn't even planning to make any compromises. And I'll tell you why that is. Because war means the end of Zelensky's rule. And that's absolutely unacceptable for him. He wants to rule Ukraine as long as Putin has led Russia and Lukashenko has led Belarus. That's the only reason. He knows that if he joins peace talks, he won't be re-elected, because the Ukraine he leads now and the one after making peace would leave him with no support. And he doesn't have it. And you can conduct your own polls and sociology studies right now. He has no more than 12% at the moment.
Trump and I will come to an agreement, and then if, and I'm sure he can offer strong security guarantees together with Europe, after that, there could be a conversation with the Russians. That's exactly how it is. It's not like the three of us just sit down right away and you talk to me as if Putin already wants to sit down and talk, but Ukraine doesn't. That's not the case.
I believe that he is, yes, ready to talk.
Did you talk to him?
On the phone or how?
And how do you usually talk to him?
Well, I don't know, at the sea too, just like with you. He invites us to the sea together with you, with me, yes.
No, it's just that one person might drown.
Who? How do you swim?
I swim well.
You swim well.
And what I mean is, it's interesting. If you have contacts with them, I just want to hear what happened then.
I've never spoken with Putin.
Just one comment. Let me remind you again. Zelensky himself officially banned himself from negotiating with Putin through the National Security and Defense Council. So everything he's saying now is just an attempt to charm, to flirt with the Western audience. Nothing here is constructive or true.
But Trump is the president of a democratic country, and he doesn't come for life. He's not Putin. He won't come for 25 years. He'll come for his term.
That's true. President Trump is a lawfully elected, democratically elected president of the democratic state of the United States of America. And Zelensky has been ruling Ukraine for almost 6 years now. The presidential term in Ukraine is 5 years. Unlike in the United States, which of course is not right, because in America it's 4. That's more than enough. In Ukraine, it's 5. But because of the war, he's been in power for almost 6 years now. And recently, when other journalists asked him if he would run for a second term, he started joking around again, flirting with the idea, but basically hinted that yes, there could be circumstances under which he would run a second time. I can tell you for sure that I know he plans to run for a second term. And now let's do the math. Ukraine's elections will likely occur in mid or late 2025. That will already be 6.5 years of Zelensky's rule. The president in Ukraine is elected for 5 years. As a result, we will end up with almost at least 12 years of Zelensky's rule. Can you imagine someone ruling for 12 consecutive years in a democratic state? It's just absurd. But people in America don't know that. That's exactly why I'm making this video and translating it into English.
Does some guy named Diadyevova get annoyed by the word NATO? Is the problem with the word? But I think he's just annoyed by living people. The ones who walk around here. And
if you think that way, it's hard to come to an agreement. If you believe that the president of some country is completely unhinged, it's hard to negotiate with him. You have to look at him as a serious person who loves his country and loves the people in that country. And yes, he does terrible military things.
what are you talking about now? Who loves their country?
Putin, do you think he doesn't love his country?
What is his country? He suddenly claims Ukraine is his country. Can you explain? Tomorrow he might call America his country.
Once again, bravo Lex, you countered him perfectly. I think you all understood perfectly well without me. You noticed that he doesn't intend to go to any negotiations. A person who wants to achieve peace can't speak about his opponent in such a tone. I emphasize, a private individual, a blogger, a journalist, or someone like that can allow themselves to do this. Currently, Ukraine's president is on the podcast with the country at war. His opponent is Vladimir Putin, and we know what kind of person he is. And Putin will see this. And I want to tell you that Zelensky is doing this on purpose to escalate and disrupt the peace negotiations in every possible way.
It's the same with people in Syria. Thousands of people are there. And you saw they found scientists there, they found doctors. It's clear that any people who are able to generate their own opinions, show their skills, develop society, anyone who can express an opinion, anyone who can foster independence and maturity in society, such people are not needed. And he wants this in Ukraine.
Such blatant, cynical lies from Zelensky. Explain to me, then what am I doing in the United States of America? Why, in the fall of 2022, after 7 months of living under rocket attacks in the city of Kyiv, where I experienced the war, as I already mentioned, did I end up in the United States of America as a political refugee? Why is my family in Ukraine being persecuted now? If Zelensky condemns this, he calls it a dictatorial approach like Syria, clearly hinting at Putin. This is all wrong. But you behave like that yourself, and all of Ukraine knows it. He is currently trying to deceive both Lex Fridman and you Americans. And taking this opportunity, I want to call on Zelensky to immediately stop persecuting my family.
Martial law is not imposed just because someone wants it. I'm sorry, this isn't Pinochet or anything like that. This is a completely different story. First, the aggressor came, and according to your own laws, if the border is violated, if there is armed aggression, it's all written down, it's been in the legislation for a long time, you declare martial law. And the introduction of martial law everywhere at all times is always a restriction of possibilities. If possibilities are restricted, rights and freedoms are also restricted. That's why war itself restricts rights and freedoms. Yes, and there's nothing you can do about it. We are trying, I'll be honest with you, to balance things as much as possible.
Another manipulation by Zelensky. In Ukraine, people are not protesting against martial law. That's really absolutely logical, correct? No one is saying that it shouldn't have been imposed. No one is talking about what's written in the law on martial law. People are protesting against forced mobilization. Ukrainians are trying to escape, men, in every possible way from Ukraine. They are being shot in the back at the border. They are being killed. Those conducting mobilization in Ukraine are often semi-criminal, masked, and lack identification. Recently, there was an outrageous case when a man who was being forced into mobilization was simply set on fire by Territorial Conscription Center and police officers in a car to make him get out. There are constant cases of murders and bodily harm to men during illegal mobilization. This is what people are protesting against. People are protesting closed borders. I want to point out that even in Israel, the borders are not closed. There is martial law and a tough situation there. Some moments were harder. Israel did not introduce any telethons, suppress free speech, or ban people from expressing opinions. Look at those protests. I don't support them ideologically, but I'm glad to see such democracy. And look at the protests in Israel. Hundreds of thousands of people are taking to the streets. I'm a supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu, but I welcome this democracy where critics can protest, journalists and bloggers speak freely, political opponents voice opinions, borders stay open in a small country, and both women and men serve. And I want to tell you, Lex and Americans, that the people close to Zelensky, both in business and in politics, as well as Ukrainian ministers and the entire Ukrainian leadership, are not affected by martial law in any way. Their friends and relatives are not fighting in this war. They basically live more or less their usual lives. Nothing that affects all other citizens of Ukraine affects them. And this is what people are protesting against. This is what I am standing against. In America, everyone follows the same law. Israel's law applies equally to all. If war breaks out in Israel, ministers' children are involved too. In Ukraine, it's not like that. A completely corrupt country. Zelensky and his team are corrupt. There are clear facts supporting this that you can easily find.
It's war, but we're doing everything, somewhere, somehow we're reducing some kind of burden. Unfortunately, we can't reduce taxes. On the contrary, the military tax is for the war. And we have to find money somewhere. By the way, that's about how America gave us a lot, and Europe too. But compared to how much we needed for the war, that's not everything. And for the military salaries, do you know that with the military salaries, we couldn't pay an army of 1 million? We couldn't pay with our partners' money. All these are expenses. All this is money that the country accumulated. People, there's nothing you can do. I really want to lower taxes, I'll be honest with you. I really want to. Well, I think that the whole new tax system, new deregulation, new steps, new reforms, all of that will come after the war.
Just recently, Zelensky signed a law on a very significant tax increase in Ukraine. No economic relief measures have been implemented. But you know what's most important? And this will be very interesting for Americans and for Lex himself to hear. It's that Putin annexed almost 30% of our territories, but instead of the number of officials in Ukraine decreasing, it actually increased. You may not know this, but some cities that Ukraine no longer controls, which Putin took, still officially exist on paper. There are tenders being held there and there are budgets. But physically, these cities are not under our control. When Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy created the douche department, I immediately proposed to create the same thing in Ukraine. I'm ready to lead this. What is Javier Milei doing in Argentina, whom Zelensky, according to him, respects so much, and Javier himself, also according to him, understands literally without words? He is downsizing the government, he has closed half of the ministries. For years, I've only made such proposals. That's exactly why I am a political opponent of Zelensky. That's exactly why they are persecuting me. That's exactly why their propaganda calls me a Kremlin agent. In Ukraine, anyone who disagrees with Zelensky is quickly called a Putin or Kremlin agent. When else should government spending be cut, if not during wartime, if not when losing territory? They are increasing funding for law enforcement agencies. They are increasing funding for the bureaucracy. They are building a real communist system. Today, more than half of the banking sector in Ukraine is state-owned. This simply can't happen in a capitalist country. I'll tell you, since Zelensky won't. After his election, he aimed to co-host the Olympics with dictator Lukashenko and Belarus. This is in a country with a $170 billion gross domestic product, the poorest country in Europe. Also, instead of privatization, which he also lied to you about, he was planning to launch national airlines before the war. While Javier Milei in Argentina aims to privatize the national airline, Zelensky wanted to establish one. He has a completely communist understanding of economics and life.
Although there are some things to be proud of, this is proof. This is a document because if you want to get candidate status in the European Union, you have to carry out the required number of reforms. We are all fulfilling them. We voted for many reforms during the war, anti-corruption, banking reforms. Before that, even before the war, there were land reforms, major reforms. We started large-scale privatization, and the war didn't stop us. Yes, it slowed us down, but we've been through a lot.
Ask yourself a question. I understand when there's opposition from current professional politicians. They're not in power like in Ukraine. They lack ideology, like Mr. Poroshenko, and just want power again. But why would people like me and other businessmen want to be in opposition to Zelensky? What's the point in that if everything is as wonderful as he says? Corruption has been defeated, and we're moving toward joining Western civilization. Why accuse him of anything? What is there really to be dissatisfied with? Do you know why we are in the opposition? Because Zelensky is lying right now from the first word to the last. I'll show you a short selection of screenshots about corruption in Ukraine on the screen right now. This is corruption during the war. This is corruption in defensive fortifications. This is just a bottomless pit of billions of dollars. Do you know what kind of corruption this is? This is when the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and other government organizations in Ukraine, for example, I'll give you a simple example that you can easily check on the internet, pay their contractors in advance for weapons, but get nothing in return. And then, when an investigation is conducted, it turns out that these companies, which are government paid, have never even been involved in activities like selling weapons. Often the deliveries just aren't completed. They ordered €1 billion worth but got only $500 million. There's no explanation for the other $500 million products. Again, Zelensky lied from start to finish. Not a single reform was carried out in Ukraine, even before the war. Let me remind you, Zelensky became Ukraine's president in spring 2019, and the war started only 3 years later. No action was taken in those 3 years.
When do you think you will hold the elections? Because for people who don't know, under martial law, elections were suspended and they kept being postponed, and postponed. I think according to the current plan, it will be in February 2025. But when do you think there will be presidential elections in Ukraine?
The elections have been postponed once. They haven't been postponed, to be honest. The elections didn't take place in 2024 this year. First of all, you need to understand they didn't happen in the spring. Because of martial law, according to the Constitution, you can't do that. And that's the presidential election and the parliamentary elections didn't take place in the fall of 2024 according to the constitution. There are things concerning security, there's the constitution, but there's also security. That is, in Ukraine, everyone understands that it's impossible to do this until the war is over or the legislation needs to be changed. I believe that the elections will take place immediately after martial law ends. That's according to the law. Or the parliamentarians need to get together and change the legislation, which will be very difficult to do because society is against it. Why does society oppose it? It's clear why. Because we want elections that we want to trust. 8.5 million have gone abroad. We need to create infrastructure for these millions of people to vote. Millions of people are in the occupied territories. I'm not even referring to the 2014 occupation. I'm referring to the recent occupation. What should we do with those people? That's a difficult question, and one of the most unfair ones. How can you vote without 1 million soldiers? So it's impossible. We need to think about how to change the system if these are going to be elections during wartime. Change the legislation, which should include changes to the system, the voting system. Think about online voting. Everyone is afraid because of various attacks, cyber and so on. But then think about it. I think it's within our power to end the war in 2025.
In January, we agreed on that.
I would really like that. I really would.
But after the end of the war?
Yes, right away.
I want to tell this for the American audience. President Poroshenko was elected when the territories were already occupied. By then, Putin had annexed Donbas and Crimea. Zelensky was elected after the territories were already occupied. As for the elections, both parliamentary and presidential, which he refused to hold, using the war as an excuse. Anyone who wants to solve a problem or an issue looks for a way to solve it. Anyone who doesn't want to deal with it looks for any excuse. Now Zelensky is making excuses. How some will vote, how others will vote. It's very easy to vote today using your phone. And that's not a problem for a serious information technology company. And that's absolutely not a problem when we live in the era of people like Elon Musk. I publicly called here on the YouTube channel for Zelensky to reach out to Elon Musk if he really wants to hold elections so that Elon could help. And help to such an extent, with such technical support, with Starlinks and software, Musk could literally pin a dashboard on his X page showing the voting live. They said no, that's wrong. Musk is an enemy who works for Russia, according to Ukrainian propaganda. I also want to give some more information about how the military would have voted. Zelensky has barred Ukraine's military from online casinos. Online casinos are popular in Ukraine, and military personnel lost money there. At least according to official information, colossal amounts of money. So, the soldiers are in the trenches with a phone and internet access, since they were playing in these online casinos which are banned. Then why can't they use that phone to vote for the candidate they want? I'll give you the answer. Because Zelensky understands that he will lose the election. That's why they didn't take place. This is information for you, Lex. So that you and all Americans know the truth.
Are you going to run for re-election?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know. That's a very difficult question. It depends on how this war ends. It depends on what people want. Mostly it depends on people, first and foremost. And of course on my family. We didn't have time to talk about it with my family.
Let me explain to you what Zelensky meant. If the war ends at the current demarcation line, Ukraine won't join the European Union or NATO. And President Trump has already officially stated today that Ukraine cannot be in NATO. I've always understood this even as a strong NATO supporter. But you always have to start from reality. So, if the war ends like this, Zelensky understands that he won't be able to raise his approval rating enough to run for a second presidential term. That's why he behaves rudely, swears, and insults people even on this podcast. That's a different question. Of course, that's his view. I'm just sharing their perspective. If Ukraine had been accepted into some kind of union, if there were better conditions there, it would have been possible to negotiate with Putin. Zelensky would have called all this a victory. After negotiations, which I'm sure will happen, Trump will make both Zelensky and Putin take part. Putin will go back to Russia and claim, "We won, we achieved our goals." His approval rating will stay high. Zelensky wants the same thing. He wants to return to Ukraine after the negotiations, after the ceasefire, after the freezing of the war, call it whatever you want, and sell something to Ukrainians for the sake of his approval rating. And all of this is just to stay in power.
I want to tell you that under me, we passed all the laws, all the anti-corruption reforms, almost all the reforms. And today, all the anti-corruption agencies are independent. They work according to the request. I still believe that they are not perfect yet. There are many issues. There is the judicial system, but also the judicial reform that our partners, the United States and the European Union, demanded from us. All of this has been outlined. This is outlined in specific laws, in specific decrees, in specific decisions. We did it. We did 99% of this. If something isn't done, it's in progress. All of this is already there. There is no system like ours in Europe. To say that we don't have corruption would be a lie. We just discuss it openly. We're actually fighting it. Look, we have imprisoned the most influential oligarch before me, the most influential oligarch in the years of independence. And no one was able to do anything about him. Not even the United States of America could do anything with Kolomoisky. And they tried everything because of money laundering and so on. There are criminal cases in the United States, I think in Delaware, something like that. Not even Europe could do anything with him. That is, we've done a lot with the oligarchs.
We also split this fragment in two. Part 1, corruption. I've already shared plenty of information today. If you don't know me, then you don't need to believe me. Come to Ukraine, go out on the street in any city of Ukraine. Stop 100 people on the street and ask them about corruption in Ukraine. Everyone will say Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe, possibly even the world. And that Zelensky's government is completely corrupt. And the second question is about the oligarchs and Mr. Kolomoisky personally. This is a shocking betrayal by Zelensky since everyone in Ukraine knows Kolomoisky basically made him president. How? Ihor Kolomoisky was the owner of the largest television channel in Ukraine, 1+1, which, by the way, has now somehow come under the control of President Zelensky's office. After that, Zelensky essentially put his friend and longtime business partner in prison. And today he comes out and calls Kolomoisky a corrupt official to the whole world, saying that no one could deal with him. The United States couldn't, Europe couldn't, and only Zelensky was able to put him in prison. But right now, I want to show you how Volodymyr Zelensky and his creative team from Studio Kvartal 95 literally danced, recited poems, and sang songs specifically for Ihor Valerievich Kolomoisky when Kolomoisky was delaying payments or some kind of compensation according to their agreements. They danced and congratulated Kolomoisky on his birthday.
Happy birthday!
Dear Ihor Valerievich, with great pleasure, honestly, we congratulate you. I also wish you everything the guys said. And friends and time and health and children and grandchildren. In general, I wish that next year everything will be just like before for you. And for us, at least something would change. Happy birthday.
Wishing you love that makes your head spin.
Thank you.
And an awesome mood. Let's keep moving!
Isn't this just meanness? How does this reflect on Volodymyr Zelensky as a person and businessman? Who would want to deal with him? And Kolomoisky is not the only example here. Look, when it was beneficial for him, he cooperated with Biden. Donald Trump has been elected and is now on the podcast suggesting Democrats are corrupt. Why is that? Because he's not with anyone. He only has his own interests. He has, I repeat, no ideology at all. And now today, with this podcast, he's trying to sing and dance in exactly the same way he did in front of Kolomoisky with the Kvartal 95 studio. It's just disguised. And now in front of Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
But the moment will come, and Trump, by the way, I think the war will end, and President Trump could be the first leader to arrive by plane. Arriving by plane would be symbolic.
Why didn't President Zelensky say such flattering words before the United States elections? Why did all Ukrainian propaganda support Kamala Harris and oppose Donald Trump? I gave you a lot of information about this today. Just one person backed President Trump. That was me, not Volodymyr Zelensky. And now a postscript. As I mentioned, there was an actor on the podcast for all 3 hours. And if I were a resident of some English-speaking or other country that is not a Ukrainian, not someone from the post-Soviet space who understands the situation deeply, it would really be very easy to fall in love with and buy into everything that Zelensky did during these 3 hours. And there's a big danger in that. Let me remind you, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a blogger. I'm part of Zelensky's unofficial opposition. I want to draw the attention of Lex Fridman and all the viewers who will watch this to a few points that for some reason were not discussed at all. Ukrainian journalists obtained information years ago about a secret meeting in Oman between Volodymyr Zelensky and members of Vladimir Putin's team, where key negotiations occurred. Clearly, something there caused the war. To this day, we don't know anything about it. Zelensky hasn't commented on this. But this is important. Maybe that's where the key to the mystery is. I want to emphasize how disgusting it is when the president talks like a thug, when he swears. Let me explain why he swore on that podcast. Also, those swear words were in Russian. When he gets angry, even while acting, he switches to Russian. That's also an element to make himself more likable. That's also acting, to show that I'm just like everyone else. I'm very close to you. Don't believe in that. There were a few moments, excerpts from the actual podcast that I didn't include. I'd like to discuss them separately. There, Zelensky said, how can you end the war if there are families, men who have lost their wives and children in this war? What will they say if we end the war? It's really scary. I completely agree with that. But every day of the war, new families appear, new men and women who lose their relatives and unfortunately, even their children. And the continuation of the war, unfortunately, will not bring anyone back, will not resurrect anyone. It won't bring back those who've died. But absolutely, every day there will be new casualties. And new families and lives ruined. So using this as an argument for continuing the war is simply blasphemous. I also want to address Lex Fridman once again. Lex, even for those remarks, comments and calls for peace and compromise that you made throughout this podcast, that alone would be enough if you were a citizen of Ukraine and on Zelensky's enemies list for a criminal case to be opened against you, just like the one opened against my mom for reposting my video. I'm telling you this just so you understand how things work in Ukraine under Zelensky. The following topics were also not raised. The head of Ukraine's security service at the time when the war began was Ivan Bakanov, a childhood friend and business partner of Zelensky. He vanished when the war began. No one knew anything. Then suddenly they replaced him with another person, who remains the security service of Ukraine head today. Bakanov himself lives peacefully in the city of Kyiv. No interrogations were conducted. How can that be? We have no information, so it's absolutely obvious. Zelensky is covering for his friend. Is this fair to other citizens of Ukraine who want and deserve to know the truth? Next, the demining of Chongar. Zelensky himself boasted before the war that he went, I think, with the same friend Bakanov to inspect the Kherson region and the mining zones. And before the war started, somehow there was demining. That means there are traitors. That means, in my opinion, Zelensky is surrounded by Federal Security Service agents. This raises major questions for Yermak himself. The next important thing is the Wagner Gate. Every English-speaking person who is listening to this right now, go to Google and read about Wagner Gate. This was a brilliant operation prepared by Ukrainian intelligence. The goal was to lure the fighters of Wagner Private Military Company, which is Putin's private army, as you know, onto Ukrainian territory, interrogate them and arrest them. It was foiled. And according to information from various sources, including those intelligence officers who were carrying out this operation at the time, it was done because of calls from President Zelensky's office. Strong hints were directed at both Yermak and Zelensky. Lex, this is an interesting topic to discuss, because those militants later killed our people, already during the full-scale war. And finally, Lex, I would like you to reflect on this fact. You lived, your parents are from Ukraine, and you spent many years living in the city of Kyiv. Imagine if you weren't so lucky. After all, moving to the United States at age 11 was a great benefit for you and your family. And I see that this has clearly had an impact on your life. You and your family have great achievements. Now imagine, put yourself in the place of those men who are citizens of Ukraine of conscription age and are currently in Ukraine. Imagine what kind of life that is, when you are completely deprived of your rights, when you are afraid to go outside, when you are forcibly sent to war, and you are not ready, neither morally nor physically, and you have no skills at all. You honestly don't want to fight. I speak with active military who say these people are a burden and major obstacle for us at the front. But they keep being drafted, violating all rights, violating the Constitution, violating all human norms. So, all of this is done by President Zelensky, who spent 3 hours in front of you playing the role of a Democrat, almost a libertarian, generally a wonderful, kind, bright person with a great sense of humor, smiling, who, as I already said, spent 3 hours trying to fool everyone, the entire Western audience, and make them fall in love with him. This is the moment worth thinking about. But personally, I am very grateful for this podcast because thanks to it, this material was able to appear, and many people not only heard my opinion, but also learned the truth about how things really are. And I will continue, just like you, Lex, to do everything I can so that peace talks begin as soon as possible and the war ends. Ukraine returns to the democratic path of development and truly becomes a part of Western civilization. So Ukraine enacts reforms similar to those of Javier Milei in Argentina, and like those planned by Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, James David Vance, and the whole team in the United States. I am very grateful to everyone who watched this long piece to the end. Please like, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, I really look forward to your comments about everything you've heard, as well as about the full version of the podcast. Thank you. Bye.